Our attendees are already in. Thank you so much, and hello everyone. Welcome to our third speaker series for 2022. And for those of you who don't know us, 51 Invest is an initiative of 51 Labs, which facilitates efficient deal making and matchmaking opportunities for local, regional, and international investors. Every month, we conduct a webinar as part of our speaker series. The series is designed to awareness of different types of investors and investments in Iraq. We also invite Iraqi and regional founders to discuss their success stories and entrepreneurial journey. And this month, we have an exciting session which is going to look into Iraq's biggest investment deal. We are pleased to have with us today Mr. Ben Harburg from MSAnovo and Dr. Munqith Alazzawi from Baly. Our session will look into the international motivation to invest in Iraq and Baly's startup journey. We will leave 15 minutes for a Q&A with the audience. And make sure to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn so you learn more about sessions like these. I'll let the panelists take it from here. Ben, can you please introduce yourself and tell us how MSAnovo decided to invest in Iraq?
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with all of you, and I'm really excited that there are people here that are as excited as we are about Iraq, which is a market that we've been following and looking for opportunities to invest in now for, I'd say, about 3 years. Baly was our first investment there, but it's not the first one where we have had a portfolio company or one of our general partners' portfolio companies that was operating in the market. And so it's one that's been on our radar for a while because of a lot of the fundamentals in the market, which I'm sure we can get into later, that make it highly compelling. But we were really, it was really an easy sell once we came across Baly because it was fitting all the kind of different criteria we're looking for, and in a market that we were hugely excited about investing in. Just in terms of our background, so I'm the managing partner at MSAnovo. MSAnovo is an emerging markets focused venture capital firm. We were launched as kind of a regional franchise out of MSA Capital, which is another firm where I'm also a managing partner. MSA Capital is a fund that is largely oriented towards kind of Greater China, East Asia, and the United States in technology investments. It has about $2 billion in assets under management and has invested in many of the sectoral leaders here in China, be it ride hailing, food delivery, gene sequencing, micromobility, all kinds of different consumer verticals, electric vehicles, you name it, healthcare, big data. So we have I'd say about 80 to 100 portfolio companies here in China today, many of whom have gone to become some of the most valuable companies globally. Many have reaching several hundred billion dollars in their current market caps listed on the international exchanges. And then about 3 years ago, we set up MSAnovo, which is essentially a franchise out of MSA Capital. Easiest way to think about it is something like Sequoia, which have Sequoia the US and Sequoia China and Sequoia India. So the basis for our for setting up this vehicle, and also it very much relates to the investment we made in Baly, is that we believe that Chinese technology models were actually the most instructive for the next wave of consumers globally. Some that are found in the global south and some that are emerging consumers in mature markets. But that because of the way that consumers in China have evolved with technology and the way that China, and therefore that, the lack of existing infrastructure and lack of archaic consumption habits, because of those unique conditions, Chinese technology adapters were able to leap rungs on the evolutionary ladder of technology adoption. And so they were able to, as you're probably well aware, to go from essentially from cash to mobile payments at a very high penetration level, or from wet markets to e-commerce at global leading penetration levels. And we believe that that same principle applied to the next wave of kind of next 5 billion users emerging, particularly those in emerging markets like Africa, the broader Middle East, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Latin America. And it was a hunch at the beginning, and it was very quickly proven true as we would go. And we as a firm now are really oriented towards the Middle East, but we also invest in South Asia, both Pakistan and India, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and also quite active in Africa. And what's been amazing to us is as we go to meet entrepreneurs in, say, Lagos or in Sao Paulo or in Baghdad, they will tell you that the benchmark for them, the North Star for them, the kind of model that they're trying to replicate is not out of Silicon Valley, but it's actually out of China. And oftentimes it's not exactly what came out of China. It's something that's maybe inspired by China and then kind of iterated upon in Southeast Asia. So, you'd have a company like Careem who would tell you that maybe their North Star is someone like Grab or Gojek. And when you talk to Grab or Gojek, they'll tell you their North Star is probably someone like Meituan or one of the other e-services applications in China. But what's fascinating is we've started to go around the world is you'd go to Y Combinator demo day, or you'd go to talk to entrepreneurs the world over, and they would say, my benchmark is this company in China for prop tech, or this company for social commerce or community-based e-commerce. And so we believe it gives us a really unique lens through which to view and evaluate potential investment opportunities, and then also to add value to them post-investment, that we can employ in them a Chinese playbook, Chinese pre-built technologies, and even Chinese team members. As a firm, we are not Chinese, but and certainly MSAnovo is an independent firm whose partners are all largely from emerging markets from the West. But it's a mantra, and it's a skill set and a playbook that we believe we've honed because of that Chinese portfolio that we've accrued. And so we've now grown to become one of the most active investors across emerging markets, across that kind of swath I mentioned, particularly in the Middle East and Africa, but now into South Asia. We're one of the most actives in Pakistan, and certainly the most active kind of Asian VC investing in all of these markets. And so now we have both venture and growth funds that enable us to cover most asset classes for emerging market entrepreneurs. We are an amalgamation of partners that came out of the Middle East and other kind of the target markets in which we operate in. And myself and a couple of my other partners, most notably someone like Walid Faza, were people that have been operating and investing in the Middle East since the early 2000s. So I started my career actually as one of the founding members of the Boston Consulting Group's offices in Dubai in 2007, which was really the beginning of our presence in the region. And over the next few years worked across all kinds of different markets, including Iraq, surprisingly, where we helped to do a kind of a 6-bank merger, which included a bank based in Baghdad. And so had some exposure to Iraq, even dating back to then. So anyway, maybe we'll get more into why Iraq and why this company later, but that's us in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Ben, for the overview. Munqith, can you tell me, please, a bit more about yourself, your background, and your journey with Baly?
Of course. Hey, first of all, hi, Elza and Gasha and the lovely audience. Thank you so much for inviting me and Ben to shed the light on the rising startup in Iraq and such as Baly. And also glad to be here with the amazing audience. My name is Munqith Alazzawi, currently taking a role of, other than a co-founder, VP of Operations. Just to give you a little bit brief of my experience, I spent 10 years in China, a place that both Ben and I really like. And I work with a number of exciting entrepreneurial projects, predominantly involving the super app concept. And I've witnessed the super app concept at the very beginning when it was very much, I would say, beneficial to Chinese, and I can see how it can contribute value not only to China but the rest of the world. Just recently, I think probably many years ago, I got my PhD in Tsinghua University, which is also a kind of a startup tech pioneers in China, which contributed as well to the network that I've known to help Baly. Baly is a super app in Iraq that serves right now. It's at the initial stage, ride-hailing and food delivery. When my co-founder and I started Baly, and had the idea at the beginning, we had the strongest mission to identify and recruit the best knowledge in the country, and combine this knowledge that we have abroad with the Iraqis to become the new leaders of the tech innovations in the region. I'll give you an example. One of the people I first found in the country was one of your cohorts, 51 Lab, Ahmed Al-Hamzawi. He started a brilliant a project involving, let's say, recruiting photographers across of Iraq. Right now started like at the beginning of Baly, right now leading one of our commercial team at Baly. So these things that 51 Labs and other innovation hubs that you guys are doing are contributing to the rise of startups in Iraq. Also, one of our strongest mission as well to connect the expertise abroad that we have with the local Iraqis. We have international teams from Italy, Germany, Pakistan, and many other countries. And what is interesting as well, as myself, as an Iraqi who lived abroad, who came back to Iraq, we are also working to bring brilliant Iraqis from all over the world, from Jordan, Dubai, US, to come to the country and start their entrepreneurial journey with Baly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Munqith. Okay, great. So back to you, Ben. You mentioned that Baly was your first investment in Iraq. So can you tell us, how did you hear about them?
Sure. It's again, it was actually quite an organic process and highly systematic in the sense that we had been looking at the market for the last 2 or 3 years and had met with most of the players locally. So, there were, people like Miswag, Lezu, Talabati, Sandug, et cetera. So it's not obviously a huge technology ecosystem today in Iraq, and one I think that will grow rapidly in the coming years, but it's one that we had already fairly well mapped out. We understood the challenges that persisted in the market, and particularly where the kind of consumer pain points lie. And again, we take a global view as we evaluate markets, and someone as nascent or as growing as Iraq, to us, there's usually a kind of standard playbook and a set of kind of an evolution of the types of companies that you would see growing there first, and then that kind of ecosystem evolves. And so if you were to look at, say, Southeast Asia 10 years ago, you would, the first emerging applications, or the first kind of most valuable companies that had the ability to address the lowest hanging fruit were those that were in the kind of this e-commerce of services super app space. So the Grabs and Gojeks of the world, which are now companies valued in excess of kind of $10–15 billion, and at their peak $40 billion. And so to us, it's a very natural then to look for a similar model in Iraq. You had some incumbents as well, regional incumbents, people like Kareem and others that were present in the market and doing some of the different pieces of the kind of broader super app service, kind of palette, but doing so in a very small a manner, and not really owning any significant share of the market, and still a lot of fragmentation. And as you know, Iraq is a fragmented market due to its kind of regional divisions. And so I think that what that meant to us was that the playing field was still very much wide open for a new entrant to rise that would provide a whole array of services So not just ride hailing and food delivery and kind of some of those initial services that you might see on a traditional a Western built mobility company like an Uber, but beyond that, a much broader suite of services that you see kind of, again, following the Chinese model that essentially take a consumer from these high frequency, low margin use cases like food delivery and ride hailing to along and kind of onboard them, but then ultimately bring them to a product that is much higher margin, but lower frequency, typically more in the kind of, events, bookings, and even financial services side of things, and ultimately can become even a digital bank and digital insurer. And so we had been kind of looking for something of that ilk in Iraq for a while, and we got to talking to our friends from Rocket Internet. We actually were at the time brainstorming with them several other potential kind of builds around the region, doing different models that we believed were compelling. And when they, we kind of both hit upon the idea of trying to set something up in Iraq, almost as even beyond just being a pure investment, almost a kind of a quasi co-build, where we're obviously still very much taking a far back seat to Rocket and to the wonderful management team. And so once we kind of outline that strategy, the playbook for us is very clear. And having already known the kind of the competitive landscape for us, it was pretty compelling to us that the people from this team had built other regional super apps highly successfully, some of the most valuable and highly trafficked regional super apps, as well as have the ability to raise significant capital, which is something that's historically been lacking in the market, and frankly, still, as good as idea is, critical to success. And so the fact that we had proven entrepreneurs, a proven playbook, a team that had done it at scale in a similar market condition, and could raise global institutional capital, which resulting in obviously what was announced recently as the biggest kind of venture-backed or technology startup funding round in the history of the market. It kind of ticked every box we could have hoped for as we looked for a deal.
Thank you, Ben. Dr. Munqith, I want to know, what are the challenges and opportunities of launching a startup in Iraq? Whether it is the infrastructure or the regulations or accessing the right team and the right talent. Can you give us a bit of insight into that?
So in my experience, indeed, every project has its challenges, and even every market has its unique challenges. But I think with the right team, it can be navigated easily. But to just speak specifically in Iraq, I could say the only challenge that I would say prolonged the timelines that we hoped for is due to the paperwork bureaucracy in terms of registering a company, in terms of you know how the paperwork things that happen for each company starting in Iraq. But that's the only, I think, the resonating challenges that we faced, but it did not interrupt our goals. Of course, at the beginning, we thought that probably we didn't find the right team, probably as well find the right place and infrastructure and so on and so on. But the team that I picked, team that I've worked with, were navigating that easily. Especially that when we find people who can contribute to Baly, is people who actually have their startup on their own. So they have been in these situations before, helped us in navigating their challenges. Opportunities, if you say, Iraq is one of the leading countries in terms of mobile penetration. So I think they only need the services that we can provide to them in terms of tech-wise and such. Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of founders watching the session right now, Iraqi founders. Can you tell us more about the investment process? I'm sure we'd like to know more about the negotiation, the valuation. How did it go, and what was the process?
So I would say that in a specific with Baly's story is that because Baly is a rocket internet tech company who both Mateo and I are in touch with rocket management, senior management in MENA region. We kind of sold them the passion to contribute to Iraq, the changes that we can provide, the experience that we have, as well as the potential experience that we can find in Iraq. And we sold them the idea that it's going to be the first unicorn story in Iraq. That tipped them off to back us in a whole range of network connections and also investments, which allowed us as well to know a brilliant guy such as Ben. So, but in reality, so we knew that because rocket internet history in building 100 successful projects around the world, and they operate in terms of not only the network they provide, but the expertise they share from other ventures around the world. Like, for example, when we have challenges, we talk a team from Germany, Philippines, Latin America, the whole world to share their experiences and their challenges, and then we can navigate the team. So, so largely through selling them the idea, and when we sold the idea, we provide the numbers that they were hoped for, breaking records, easier than that. And that's why we got the pre-seed rounding, the largest pre-seed rounding in the Iraq history of 10.5, and we're working on a round right now as well.
Can you tell me, how will you deploy this latest funding round?
Yes, of course. We let's say deploy that funding in terms of recruitment, in terms of tech development, in terms of also setting operational hubs across Baghdad, as well as marketing. And, you know, the usual business stats that we use. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Munqith. Moving back to Ben. So do you think you'll continue investing in Iraq? And what would motivate your quality and quantity of investments?
Yeah, I mean, I think Iraq is a really compelling market, as I said. I mean, it has a lot of the key conditions that we look for, and in some ways is a more compelling market than a lot of its neighbors, even those that are maybe a bit more affluent or a longer period, have had longer periods of political stability. You know, what Iraq has is a highly sticky group of customers that are kind of just beginning their journeys. And so therefore, if you can kind of be their initial entry point and you're kind of the one who's walking them online, you can own a lot of their customer journey. You know, it's obviously has a very large, highly educated population with relatively high purchasing power. You know, it has a group of entrepreneurs, I hope some of whom are on the call today, who deserve a huge amount of credit because they're entrepreneurs that are hugely resilient and can build in and deal with crises and periods of uncertainty on a level not really seen in most other markets globally. I personally believe that businesses in Iraq, from Iraq, can also scale regionally. I don't think Baly will necessarily be a Iraq-only company in the long run. I think there are other adjacent markets with similar consumer behavior, similar competitive landscapes, and just overall similar market conditions that would be attractive targets for expansion. You know, operating costs are actually relatively low relative again to other markets, just in terms of the opportunity cost that we'd have to pay people, at least domestically, to compete with a local salary. Although it's obviously something that is expensive when we have to try to bring in and recruit people from abroad, as we had to do for this team. And I think it's a market that's pretty well moated. So if we, you know, I think it's challenging for outside businesses to come in and challenge Baly, so we can create it as a kind of a regional stronghold and then go out rather than having to defend within. So no, we will continue to look aggressively at the market. I think there's a lot that is broken or inefficient, particularly in the financial services space, which is an area we focus on significantly. Other commerce spaces, so again, be it community, social, other forms of, again, Chinese pioneered or popularized e-commerce models that I think are perfectly designed for a market like Iraq, which has very low e-commerce penetration levels, and therefore has huge susceptibility to a new model, which helps to build that kind of initial trust between consumers and a platform, which is hard. That kind of trust barrier is hard to overcome for people that are unaccustomed to buying things online. And so if you can find models, as we have in China, using social influencers and live streaming, or social shopping where friends and neighbors sell to you, or community shopping where you get a discount because you buy alongside of your neighbor, all these types of models I think are perfectly in tune for the market. So we're very much on the hunt and systematically looking for opportunities in Iraq on a weekly basis.
Do you know of any other international and regional investors that are interested in Iraq?
Unfortunately, I think certainly there are a couple domestic funds in Iraq, so I have to give credit to them and their support of the ecosystem. I definitely think that there are a couple other global firms, most of whom invested in this deal. So I don't have to even name check them because you can look at the announcements, but there are a couple other international firms that are a little more adventurous like ourselves, that are willing to go to a geography like this that isn't in the traditional kind of geographic sweet spot, even for your traditional emerging market funds. And I also think that, but I think that will change. I mean, I think and again, Baly has the potential to be that game-changing company where, because people see the valuation it's able to reach, the type of capital, the institutional capital it's able to attract, investors are very much like lemmings. That once they see names that they recognize and see success, they'll follow very quickly and ask fewer questions. It's much harder to be kind of the pathfinder, as we are here, to have conviction in a market for several years, to stay patient, to find the right company, and then to make sure that it has the right level of success. But I think if we're able to show these types of outcomes with this investment, we'll be able to attract a lot of, because there's obviously now a very robust and mature regional VC ecosystem, largely rooted out of kind of the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and to a lesser extent Bahrain, and obviously there's a large entrepreneurial ecosystem as well as a venture ecosystem, as kind of a little bit further afield into Africa and in Egypt. And so, and there's also great support and a growing economic kind of ecosystem out of Jordan, and we're actually supported by one of the great limited partners out of Jordan, a sovereign entity that's a partnership with the World Bank called ISSF. And so there is capital now for companies that are kind of operating within the kind of Levant region. And so I believe that there will be more momentum towards Iraq from other regional funds that had not yet systematically looked at it. There's plenty of regional funds that maybe have one or two investments in the market just because opportunistically, or because that company has a base or presence in the UAE or Lebanon or elsewhere. But I think that, Iraq focused and Iraq systematic is still a little ways off for the rest of the regional kind of VCs.
Would you be interested in co-investing with any other Iraqi investors?
Absolutely. I mean, we're always, one of our first questions always, whenever we look at a deal in a new geography, is who's on the cap table? Is that regional smart money, that local smart money on the cap table? We know firms, within many of our markets to work with and work alongside. And so in the case of for instance, in Baly, I don't think there are any kind of regional or local funds that are invested, but there are certainly some local angel investors who've come on board recently, who are kind of key opinion leaders and very impactful in their relationships, in their networks, or they're strategic investors that bring to the bring to the business, their connectivity to commercial partners. So people like Marsh Holdings and others like that aren't a kind of traditional VC fund, but someone that we certainly like to invest alongside in the market because we know that they have been embedded there for generations and understand the incumbent landscape as well as how new technologies could disrupt that.
Thank you, Ben. Moving back to Dr. Munqith. So what is one piece of advice you would give to entrepreneurs just starting out? And what is the advice that you wish you had received when you first started out?
All right, for the first part, I would say that the most essential advice that is commonly known is to have the right team. And I'm talking about the right team. It's not about just technical. It's about also having the humanistic aspect of the factor in terms of motivating the team, having a bit of leadership in order to navigate the challenges that commonly known everywhere in the world. Also, always look your eyes open into not only in the local area, but regionally, abroad, ideas that haven't been brought to the country and they can be the pioneer for it. So the right team with the right pitch and with the right numbers, of course. Yes, that's I think my advice for the entrepreneurs right now. A perfect piece of advice that I got is always be humble for whatever mistakes one can do. Just acknowledge, work on it, and then improve. Yes.
So how do you see the super app space developing in the next few years, internationally, but also more specific in Iraq?
So just to, I left out a part of a thing that we're working on. So we're already right now bringing brilliant numbers in terms of ride hailing and food. And that success story that we brought it in Baghdad, we're gonna have it in Basra and the remaining regional cities in Iraq. And then in the meantime as well, while we are actually training and developing the team we have, we're opening other ventures to complete the whole super app ecosystem. And so in the next, I say, the soon near future, having many services that people rely on the super app in order to kind of rely on one app for many of the services. Yes.
So can you give me an example? Like what kind of services do you see Iraq is lacking right now?
Fintech, for sure. Fintech. I know, Ben, we have this thing in China where we say we don't carry our wallets anymore. Absolutely no. The concept of having a wallet in the pocket is just archaic, right? So this is one of the things I'm trying to bring to Iraq is a cashless society. Another is travel, supply chain, and whatnot. Yes.
What do you think has been an obstacle for the rise of digital payments or fintech in Iraq? And how would you see yourself overcoming them?
I can see that there are a couple of fintech ventures here in Iraq, but I would say that they are also struggling with some of the bureaucracy that the government actually have, even though that they have developed so much into integrating the tech ecosystem in the region. So these are the challenges that they have, and I think we can overcome that easily. Yes.
Okay, thanks. So now we still have a little bit of time. I just wanted to ask you, Ben, right now, because you talked about synergies with China and the model that you have with China. And you touched upon super apps, but what other startup models do you have in China and you would like to see within Iraq that would make you interested in investing in that?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of ways to onboard customers into a super app, right? The tactic taken by Baly is, as I said, is kind of more of that high frequency throughput that's driven by ride hailing and food delivery. But there are other ways to do it and to build, therefore, corresponding kind of products and use cases off the back of it. So that includes things like short form video applications or something kind of in the content space. That includes bill pay and utilities and kind of top up and that whole ecosystem that can be, again, to some degree imposed upon clients by a telco or a bank or a government kind of entity. That includes news readers and other forms of kind of local content creation. It also includes products, and those news readers. One unknown story about China is actually a news reader. When ByteDance launched, ByteDance, the mother company of TikTok, it actually started as a news reader that kind of filtered and provided for you highly localized news stories based on your kind of similar to like a Facebook news feed or something, but where based on how much time you hovered over a story or read a story, it would feed you more stories like that. And so all of these are different avenues to onboard someone to a super app. But certainly for us, I think, now that we have made our bet in the super app space in Iraq, and hopefully there is only one. Obviously, we're here invested and giving all of our energy and time to ensure that level of success for Baly. Then we'll probably turn our attention to things outside of their operating scope. So wherever they decide to draw the line on fintech, we will then look at kind of the broader fintech ecosystem, which is something we really have deep experience and investment track record in. So SME financing, trade financing, consumer financing, something like a buy now, pay later, agent banking, asset financing, wealth management. We're, as a firm, actually quite active in the crypto investment space. And a market like Iraq, actually, and I don't know the exact regulatory conditions on the ground today around crypto because we haven't yet seen any opportunities in Iraq around the space. But what we often see is that the highest adopters of crypto kind of products, be it wealth management, savings, and investing, are in markets where consumers are the most nascent and the most underdeveloped. And so some of the biggest adopters today of crypto are sitting in markets like Vietnam, India, Pakistan, Nigeria. And so I think that, and often in those markets, their needs, be it trading public equities or wealth management or savings, are not really in tune to the needs and demands of the next generation of consumers. And so it offers kind of a seismic shift opportunity to move from very meager offerings on the wealth management or investment side to something in the crypto space. So you'd see us playing there in fintech. On the retail, then we have a separate bucket of types of companies we look at, which we call kind of retail enablers or rudimentary enterprise businesses. So that's companies in the logistics space, be it last mile, fulfillment, warehousing, supply chain management, companies that connect the FMCG brands to SME retailers, along the lines of some of our regional portfolio companies like Sari or Capita, companies that provide tools for SMEs like digital bookkeeping, office digitization, helping SMEs or mom and pop shops to digitize themselves essentially along the lines of a Shopify model. So that's another space we think is highly prospective in a market like Iraq, which has historically been very offline to bring these businesses online and create a lot of scale. And then selectively, following in our investment in Baly, we're looking for those kind of consumer-oriented plays. So outside of things like that, like Baly does, in terms of on-demand delivery or maybe quick commerce or others that we've invested in before, we're looking at things in the live streaming space or instant messaging, social networks. short form video, gaming. And again, there's some of that filters into the crypto space of kind of these play to earn games or something like that. So a lot of white space, I think, competitively in Iraq, and a lot of sectors where we don't see certainly a regional or local leader, and in sectors that we know these are types of models that should be there and will be there. So we'll be following those models.
Thank you, Ben. I'm going to open now questions from the audience, and we have a lot of questions. The first one is, what are the top 3 attributes to look for in an Iraqi e-commerce company when investing?
It's a good question. So we've as a fund, we've done very little regional e-commerce, and I'm not entirely sure what type of e-commerce this question is referring to, be it kind of fast fashion and the kind of usual suite of products that maybe someone like a Noon or a Souk have historically offered, or if it's more of a kind of FMCG consumables oriented e-commerce. As a firm, we have only invested, I think, really in one regional e-commerce marketplace today, a company called HomeSmart in Egypt, that is really oriented towards the furniture and kind of office and home marketplace. And the reason I talk about that company, because it kind of provides a framework for you to understand what we would invest in Iraq, which is we're looking for a market that's very unique and not done well by other regional marketplaces. So, our first question whenever we look at an e-commerce company is, why couldn't Amazon do this? Why couldn't Souk do this, or Noon? Why couldn't any of the regional e-commerce giants do it? Because e-commerce is often one where you don't have like a national champion. You can have in the case of Iraq, a regional champion or global champions. In the case of obviously an Alibaba or an Amazon. And so oftentimes there is no reason, it's hard for us to justify a regional e-commerce play on the basis that we obviously have a very high bar. We expect a very a high growth bar for that company. And it's often the case that regionally built e-commerce players just have a certain kind of a upper limit that never enables them to get too big. So for instance, in the in the first wave of technology companies that came out of the Middle East, you had a lot of companies being built by regional entrepreneurs, maybe in the kind of mom and baby space or some other kind of a niche vertical there. And none of them, by our estimation or by our standards, had very good exits. They all were kind of ultimately acquired by a regional kind of offline retail group or something else like that. And so the first question we always have, and that you're going to have to answer, is how is this moated? How is this unique? How is this defensible against regional players coming in or global players coming in? The second thing we're looking for is some kind of supply chain mastery. So we have, as MSA, invested in Chinese companies that are going cross-border, and a couple of them, I think, actually maybe even are operating in Iraq. Certainly, one of them has a large presence in Jordan. It's called 4Deal, and it's possible that they've already mentioned to us that they're selling into Iraq. The reason why we like that type of a profile, again, is they have access to a very low-cost supply chain. So they're getting products from producers directly in China, where they can manage the minutia of those supply chain costs. Because at the end of the day, most e-commerce companies are really just kind of cost management logistics companies. If you look at some of the best Chinese cross-border e-commerce companies like Shein, they look more like a logistics company than they do an e-commerce company. And you obviously, someone like Amazon have mastered having hyper efficient warehousing, kind of trucking, and ultimately kind of last mile delivery. So for us, one is moat, two is how strong is your logistics, how strong is your supply chain, and then probably the third would be what types of regional partnerships, or again, things that you have. Do you have a partnership with the largest retail groups in the country, say in Iraq in this case? Do you have the partnership or kind of some kind of exclusivity with the largest logistics player or the largest consumer financing player? Or again, something that's going to provide an added incentive and drive traffic to you from kind of your partner, and therefore again be something that But so our bar is very high, and it's often challenging for us to find a e-commerce player of that ilk. We invest in someone like HomeSmart because the founder is an incredible entrepreneur. He actually worked for Alibaba for a few years, even though he's Egyptian. So kind of, understands the Chinese business model, e-commerce, and all the kind of ins and outs of it. He also has a very unique relationship with sourcing channels for his product in Iraq. A lot of the furniture coming out of Diamata City in Egypt, which is a unique kind of sourcing place for furniture at a very low cost. He has an incredible logistics business. And again, his vertical is one that's not done well by any of the other regional players. And so we felt in that unique case that was a good e-commerce bet, but overall it's a challenging space.
Another attendee is asking, would you be interested in investing in edtech or hardware startups?
Good question, and unfortunately not a great answer. We try to really focus on what we do and not spread ourselves too thin across too many verticals. And part of that is just being disciplined and saying no a lot if we feel like a investment opportunity is outside of our sectoral sweet spot. And so education is a space that we have actually not invested in historically in the region. I know there have been some good regional education companies built in Saudi Arabia and Jordan and in Egypt, and I'm sure someday there will be others in Iraq. It makes sense to me, but just sectorally, it's a space where we have seen these companies struggle to monetize, struggle to retain users on a healthy basis. China right now is a graveyard of education technology companies. Some of that had to do with government intervention, but a lot of it also just had to do with the business model. Again, was very challenged. It was, the cost of acquiring a user relative to their lifetime value to the platform never really made economic sense for us. So it's a space that we just don't feel we know enough about, and therefore are not investing in. Hardware is an even easier no, I would say. So one of our bars, particularly for a market like Iraq, and as I mentioned in my first comment, again, Iraq is still very much in that early evolutionary period where you can go after the lower hanging fruit. And so to us, that is consumer facing companies, that's, really key functionality to solve critical pain points in the financial services space. Maybe eventually that becomes a local digital bank or a local neobank. But rarely in a market like Iraq would you see a need for or caliber of product coming out in spaces like SaaS, like more, generalist SaaS, or in hardware. And hardware, again, from our experience in China, one of the reasons why we always go back to this China story, because again, it's not that we're Chinese, but China has a really wonderful kind of history, and I'm a student of history. And if you read about the Chinese kind of hardware or any technology ecosystem over the last 10 years, you can get a lot of insight into how the rest of the world will evolve. And hardware, again, is a space that's just so challenging. I mean, if you look at it, and again, I'm not sure if the question's about consumer-facing hardware or enterprise hardware, industrial hardware, but it's a space where it's very challenging to maintain your market share. It's very easy for someone with a much lower production price point to come out and produce something that's cheaper than you. And we're seeing it over and over. We're seeing it in the hardware for fitness space, where we're littered again with kind of disaster stories like Fitbit or now Peloton to some degree, and we see it in the wearable space. We see it just all over the place, and so it's a challenge. So if you're an entrepreneur today, I would, especially in a market with so much opportunity in kind of the more basic enterprise and SaaS spaces, I'd encourage you to kind of steer your energy more towards that lower hanging fruit than trying to build something in the pure hardware space.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And this question is more for Munqith. How did you find the team and the team you used to grow and what was the strategy you used to grow the team?
Also, one of the good questions that you guys asked. How did I find the team? Two sources: LinkedIn, which I surprisingly in Iraq, it's a little bit new in Iraq, I would say, but LinkedIn definitely helped me here in Iraq and in other places. And also places like 51 Lab and other places in Iraq like that. Yes. Also, of course, comes by referrals. Like when I recruit a brilliant guy and he vouches for another, goes under the, I would say, a harsh interview process, but I say, yeah, an interview process. Yes.
Okay. And we have Hussein Ali asking, do you think digitizing supply chain has a promising future in Iraq?
That's a question for me, of course, yes. Yes, for sure. And in Iraq, I think one of the industries that growing and also essential is the food industry. And this is one of the aspects that we want to digitize it and bring the kind of the technology that exists all over the world, customize it, develop it in the local needs. And yeah, it's potential, it's necessary, and the needs already there. Yeah.
We have a question saying, why does Baly address itself as an Iraqi startup with Iraqi talents when it's using Snap business model, the Iranian super app, and having Snap tech team to develop Baly?
Very good question. So at the start, at the beginning, I said that there's Iraqis and there's internationals, backed by Rocket. Rocket is all over the world, set in Germany, Philippines, Latin America, and we built one of the Rocket actually built one of the famous startups in the world. And the way how we do it is all knowledge sharing, right? So, for example, as I said, we found tech challenges that otherwise resources right now cannot handle it. You get a team abroad. So that is the kind of the essential key contributor success to a rocket factory building or startup building around the world.
We have Manuel Langendorf asking, in terms of promoting fintech in Iraq, what needs to be done to move the mindset away from a cash economy, and what role does improving digital and financial literacy play in this?
Also a very good question. The thing is that right now, if for example, as like you come to Baghdad, everything that probably the majority of the things that you need to buy, to purchase, pay electricity and all is through cash. And what we're trying to do is that kind of create this consumer behavior and user experience that relies on cashless experience through the Baly product. And with time, we grow this experience with our customers in order to adjust to a new model, wealth management, and the other services in the future. And we're looking as well to, and I'm just speaking this out loud, is to help the government to kind of digitize these formalities in the way of cashless society.
Okay, so we still have 4 more minutes. Are there anything else that Ben or Munqith you would like to add? Is there any words of wisdom you'd like to give our audience?
Ben, you want to start?
Go ahead. No, up to you.
I just want to just congratulate Baly team. Then the names are in my head: Ali Najib from the team, from food team, Ibrahim Saif. We have so many brilliant people who worked day and night to contribute to the success story. So, in terms of wisdom, I would say a learning journey that I had is that people with passion can create wonders, truly. And I've seen this from those brilliant guys. And by the way, I wouldn't say just guys only, girls as well. 70% of our Baly team is from the female gender, which makes me a little bit proud.
Thank you, Munqith. How about you, Ben?
I think my closing words are just to say that I'm an American, and Iraq is a place that's sensitive to me as an American. I've watched as we facilitated a process that in many ways destroyed and set back the country decades in its development. Maybe helped in some ways, but certainly hurt in a lot of others. And I personally feel, and certainly one of my drivers in 2 or 3 years ago, looking at the market was that we owe a great debt to the people of Iraq. And I'm so excited to see a flourishing now Iraqi ecosystem of entrepreneurs, of investors, people like yourselves, people like Capital, and and then all of the different global aid organizations, because it's not just an incredible opportunity, but it's one that the world owes to improve. And my view is that a dollar invested into an Iraqi
Ben, I think your mic is off. We can't hear you anymore. Hello?
Ben?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, now. Yes.
Now we can hear you. We lost you for a minute.
Okay. I was just saying that having a thriving startup ecosystem in Iraq, having a thriving investment ecosystem is critical. It will drive the rest of the country forward. Its offspring will create entrepreneurs. We hope that within 3 or 4 years from now, there's a Baly mafia of other companies started by Baly alums in other verticals that they came across as they were founding this, and having learned from incredible founders like Munqith and others that they can learn from and take back to other problems that they want to address within the market. And so I'm really excited that you are all here with us, and I hope that we all can do our efforts to drive forward this ecosystem, because startups are really the way that it will evolve far faster than anyone's imagination.
Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you so much, Munqith. This was an amazing session. And looking forward to hear about all the new updates you might have. And thank you for the audience. Please make sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Ben. Bye-bye.